The stage was set long before the curtain fell. You were the centerpiece, the easy mark for their games of malice. They chipped away at you, laughing as you stumbled, reveling in the chaos they had spun. But the irony dripped from their lips like poison when they cried for understanding, for absolution, as though the wreckage they left in their wake was someone else's fault. Sympathy is a luxury afforded to the innocent, not those who light the match and feign surprise at the fire. Pain is a language that speaks in silence, in wounds that refuse to heal. It is the echo of betrayal that clings to your bones, long after the perpetrators have left. They sought to break you, to bury you under the weight of their cruelty. And yet, when the dust cleared, they were the ones suffocating in the hole they dug. The world has a twisted way of balancing scales, no matter how long it takes. Their pleas for forgiveness sounded hollow, like a song sung off-key. It wasn't remorse they offered, but manipulation cloaked in the guise of regret. They wanted you to forget the scars they inflicted, to pretend that the pain was never real. But you know better now. Pain teaches clarity. Suffering sharpens the mind. Forgiveness isn't something you hand out like candy. It's earned in blood and tears, neither of which they were willing to shed. People like that always play the victim in the stories they create. To them, your resilience wasn't a testament to your strength, but an inconvenience to their narrative. They wanted a broken character, someone who would crumble on cue. Instead, they got someone who stood tall, someone who wouldn't be cast as the weak link in their performance. You refused to give them the satisfaction, and that's what tore them apart. The real tragedy isn't that they hurt you, it's that they thought they could erase the damage with crocodile tears. They underestimated the power of accountability, the weight of their own actions bearing down on their hollow words. When someone tears another apart and then begs for sympathy, it's not love they seek. It's a distraction from their guilt. You've learned to see through the mask. There's a special kind of strength in saying nothing at all. Silence, after all, is a weapon in its own right. While they screamed for validation, for attention, you stood in the shadows, unmoved. Their noise was deafening, but your quiet resolve spoke volumes. Sometimes, the loudest thing you can say is nothing at all. Those who destroy and then cry for forgiveness fear one thing more than anything else: indifference. They want your anger because anger keeps you tied to them. They want your sorrow because sorrow keeps you looking back. But when you walk forward, untethered and unbothered, you become the thing they feared most, a reminder of their failure, their irrelevance. The concept of sympathy is often misunderstood. It's not a currency you owe to those who have wronged you. It's not something you dispense to ease another's guilt. Sympathy is reserved for those who suffer without cause, not for those who engineer their own misfortune and expect others to carry the weight of it. You have nothing to offer them now but the cold comfort of their consequences. Your survival was their undoing. They counted on your collapse, built their foundation on your fragility. But instead of breaking, you rose. Instead of sinking, you soared. And now, as they wallow in the aftermath of their destruction, they're forced to watch you thrive. There's no greater punishment for those who sought to ruin you than the sight of your strength. Sympathy, for some, is the most intoxicating drug. It's a mirror they hold to the world, begging others to reflect pity back at them, while hiding the twisted, venomous grin lurking just beneath the surface. To garner sympathy is to hold a subtle power, the power to control the narrative, to shape perception, and to bind others with invisible chains of guilt. Those who crave it often weaponize their wounds, real or imagined, to achieve their end. But every tear they shed is laced with poison, every plea a carefully woven web designed to ensnare the naive. People who feed on sympathy often position themselves as martyrs of their own orchestrated tragedies. They rewrite history, painting themselves as victims of circumstances they carefully engineered. It's a masterstroke of manipulation, one that draws attention away from their sins and onto the scars they claim were inflicted by others. The more you listen, the more you realize their stories don't add up. But by the time the threads begin to unravel, you're already caught in their performance, a reluctant audience to their theatrics. Sympathy seekers are often cowards at their core. They avoid responsibility, hiding behind the veil of victimhood, because facing their own actions would mean confronting the ugliness within. They crave attention, not because they're wounded, but because they fear insignificance. Every sob, every trembling confession is a scream into the void, a desperate attempt to be seen, to be acknowledged, to exist. Those who exploit sympathy also fear strength in others. When you refuse to play into their games, when you withhold the pity they so desperately seek, you become a threat to their constructed reality. They lash out, painting you as cruel or heartless, not because you've wronged them, but because you've denied them their lifeline. Their tears dry quickly when no one is there to watch them fall. The game of sympathy is a zero-sum game. For every ounce of pity they collect, someone else loses a piece of themselves. Their strategy is simple: drain the compassion of others until there's nothing left. In their world, kindness isn't a virtue, but a currency, one they hoard with no intention of giving back. They see empathy not as a bridge, but as a weapon, one they wield with precision and cruelty. There's a reason sympathy addicts often find themselves alone in the end. The act wears thin. People grow weary of constantly propping up the same sagging facade. Over time, even the most compassionate hearts begin to harden, recognizing the pattern for what it is: a cycle of abuse disguised as need. The very tool they use to gain control becomes the reason they lose it. True strength lies in understanding the difference between genuine vulnerability and weaponized pity. Those who wield their wounds like a blade can only be disarmed by those unwilling to fight their battles for them. You've learned this the hard way. You've seen how quickly their cries for help turn into demands, how their gratitude turns to resentment when you refuse to carry their burdens any longer. It's almost poetic how their quest for sympathy leaves them so devoid of it. In the end, people begin to see through the lies, the manipulation, the endless parade of fabricated woes. Sympathy, once so freely given, becomes a barren wasteland, leaving them to wallow in the emptiness they created. There's no applause for their performance anymore, no audience to validate their existence. You've walked away from the game. You've stopped lending your ears to their sob stories, your heart to their schemes. In doing so, you've reclaimed a piece of yourself that was lost in their chaos. Their need for sympathy is a reflection of their inability to face the consequences of their actions, a flaw they can never escape. You don't need to confront them, nor do you need to explain yourself. Your silence is enough. Manipulation is not just an action. For some, It is an instinct, a reflex, as natural as breathing. These people don't walk through life. They weave. Each word they utter, each tear they shed, is another thread in their intricate tapestry of deceit. They spin wheels of manipulation with an artisan's touch, crafting illusions so convincing that even the wisest can be momentarily ensnared. Without these mechanisms of control, their existence collapses. To manipulate is their survival, their identity, their essence. Their power lies in subtlety. Rarely do they shout their intentions. Instead, they whisper doubts, plant seeds of guilt, and gently nudge the narrative in their favor. They are the puppeteers of perception, pulling strings with a smile while keeping their own hands clean. It's a game to them, one they've mastered through years of practice. They thrive in chaos because chaos gives them the cover they need to operate undetected. These people are not creators, but destroyers. They lack the ability to build anything real, so they dismantle what others hold dear. Relationships, reputations, trust. Everything is fair game for their wheels of manipulation. They don't just deceive others, they deceive themselves, convincing their own minds that their actions are justified, even noble. Their self-awareness is selective, their morality a shifting line drawn in sand. What's most sinister is how they exploit the goodness in others. They prey on empathy, twisting compassion into a tool for control. They target those who care deeply, those who want to help, and use their virtues as weapons against them. It's not enough for manipulators to succeed. They must ensure their victims feel complicit in their own downfall. It's a cruel irony. Those who try to save them are often the ones who suffer most. Yet manipulators live in constant fear, though they'll never admit it. Fear of exposure, fear of irrelevance, fear of losing the control they so desperately cling to. Their spinning wheels may be intricate, but they are also fragile. The slightest crack in their web of lies can send the entire structure crashing down, and when that happens, the emptiness they've masked for so long becomes impossible to ignore. To escape their grip, one must learn to see beyond the surface. Manipulators rely on distraction, on smoke and mirrors, to keep their victims from noticing the strings. But once you recognize the patterns, the illusion shatters. Their power dissolves the moment you refuse to play their game. To see through manipulation is to reclaim your freedom, to step out of the shadow they cast. There is no redemption for those who make manipulation their lifeblood, only the hollow satisfaction of temporary victories. They may win battles, but they lose wars, for manipulation isolates as much as it controls. People begin to drift away, tired of the lies, wary of the games. The manipulator becomes a solitary figure, spinning wheels in the dark with no one left to ensnare. And so, they find themselves trapped in the very web they wove. The wheels of manipulation never stop turning, but they no longer serve a purpose. Without others to deceive, their existence becomes a loop of emptiness, a repetition of the same hollow tricks. What was once their strength becomes their prison, their second skin, a suffocating shell. Manipulators wear many masks, and one of their favorites is the mask of family or friendship. They use these titles like shields, deflecting accountability while tightening their grip. They weave their control into the bonds you hold sacred, exploiting your sense of loyalty, your innate need to belong. To them, every yes is a submission, every concession a small victory in their unending campaign to dominate your life. But the moment you resist, the mask begins to slip. The first no you utter feels like an earthquake. It shakes the foundations of their control, and they respond with calculated ferocity. They'll unleash the arsenal of guilt, painting you as the selfish one, the ungrateful one. Their words are daggers aimed at your deepest insecurities, crafted to make you doubt yourself, to make you wonder if standing up for your dignity is worth the storm they're unleashing. But it is. Emotional blackmail is their weapon of choice. They twist your emotions, making you feel as though your independence is an act of betrayal. They'll call your boundaries cruelty, your self-respect arrogance. And yet the louder their accusations grow, the clearer it becomes who the real villain is. They need you subdued, silent, compliant. Without your submission, their control crumbles. Breaking free is a war of attrition. Each step away from their influence feels like dragging your feet through quicksand. They'll try every tactic to pull you back, pleading one moment, raging the next. They count on your compassion, your fear of conflict, to draw you into their web once more. But every time you stand firm, you weaken their grip. Each refusal to play their game brings you closer to freedom. Their accusations of selfishness are projections of their own fragile ego. Manipulators cannot fathom a world where they aren't the center of attention, the puppet masters pulling the strings. To them, your autonomy is an act of rebellion, a direct threat to their carefully constructed dominance. But their anger is only proof of your strength. You are no longer their pawn. The manipulation often takes the form of a sickening cycle. They push you to your limits, then act as though they're the victim when you finally break. They rewrite the narrative, casting themselves as the wronged party, the innocent sufferer of your so-called selfishness. It's a charade designed to pull you back into their orbit. But you've seen through the act. Freedom comes with a price. Walking away means confronting the guilt they've instilled in you, the fear that you've done something wrong. But in time, you'll see the accusations for what they are, a desperate attempt to regain control. The more you separate yourself, the more their manipulative games lose their power. What once felt insurmountable becomes a distant echo, fading with every step you take toward your own life. Family or friends, manipulators, don't truly value the bond. They value the control it gives them. They'll throw the word selfish at you like a weapon, hoping it will stick, hoping it will wound you enough to make you retreat. But selfishness, in their language, means nothing more than choosing yourself over their dominance. And there is nothing wrong with that. You learn that saying no is not the act of a villain, but the act of someone reclaiming their own narrative. Manipulators rely on your fear, your hesitancy, your desire to avoid conflict. But when you start prioritizing your peace, their power diminishes. They are not omnipotent. Their control exists only as long as you allow it. Taking a stand is the ultimate act of defiance. There exists a breed of individuals who hunger not for connection, not for love, but for control. Their sustenance is leverage, the ability to press their weight upon the scales of someone else's life. It's not born of necessity, nor even of desperation. It is desire distilled to its most sinister form, a craving to dominate, to see others dance to the strings they pull. And so, they watch and wait, seeking the cracks in your armor where their leverage might take hold. These are the ones who keep a ledger of every favor done, every secret shared, every misstep you've made. To them, life is not lived. It is negotiated. Every kindness is a transaction. Every conversation, a potential tool to bind you. They are predators dressed as confidants, feeding on vulnerabilities as though it were their birthright. The more they know, the tighter their grip, and the harder it becomes to disentangle from their grasp. Their leverage is subtle at first, almost imperceptible. A quiet comment here, a knowing glance there, and you begin to question yourself. Are you being paranoid? Or have you handed them the keys to your cage without even realizing it? They rely on your doubt, your tendency to rationalize their behavior. After all, you tell yourself, it's only a small compromise. But those small compromises grow into chains before you can take your first step back. Control for them is not about necessity. It's about validation. It fills the void in their soul, the hollow space where self-worth should reside. By bending you to their will, they feel larger, more powerful, more real. Their existence hinges not on their own accomplishments, but on their ability to keep others tethered to their whims. Without leverage, they face the unbearable prospect of their own insignificance. There's a perverse satisfaction in their tactics, a cold calculation that leaves you questioning your every move. They know how to sow seeds of self-doubt, how to make you second-guess your instincts. Their goal is not merely to gain control, but to make you believe that you need their control. They want to rewrite your narrative until you can't tell where their influence ends and your decisions begin. But leverage is a fragile thing. It relies on your silence, your complicity, your unwillingness to sever the ties that bind you. The moment you refuse to play their game, their power begins to crumble. Their strength is an illusion, a shadow cast by your own fear. Once you shine a light on it, the shadow disappears, and all that remains is a hollow figure grasping at empty air. Escaping their grip requires more than defiance. It requires self-awareness. You must see their manipulation for what it is, a desperate attempt to feel significant at your expense. And once you see it, you must act. Cut the threads, burn the bridges, and walk away without looking back. The cost of keeping them in your life is far greater than the pain of letting them go. What's left when their leverage fails? An emptiness they can no longer deny. The same void they tried to fill by controlling you now looms larger than ever. They are left not with power, but with the bitter taste of their own inadequacy. And as you rise, unburdened by their weight, they are forced to confront the reality that their leverage was never strength. It was weakness, masquerading as dominance. There's a peculiar tragedy to those who seek leverage over others. They invest so much effort in mastering the art of manipulation that they forget to master themselves. Their lives become a labyrinth of lies and control, a tangled web where even they forget which thread leads to freedom. In their obsession with dominating others, they neglect to cultivate anything real within themselves. And when their schemes fall apart, as all hollow things eventually do, they are left adrift in the ruins of their own making. You, however, are the phoenix rising from those ashes, untouched by their downfall. When you break free, the power dynamic shifts in a way they cannot comprehend. They are no longer the puppet master. They are the puppet without strings, limp and purposeless. They relied on your presence to validate their existence, and now, in your absence, they face the crushing weight of their own irrelevance. No amount of posturing or manipulation can fill the void left by someone who refuses to play their game. And so they spiral, clinging desperately to memories of a control they can never reclaim. The final triumph is not merely in walking away, but in thriving beyond their reach. Your refusal to participate in their cycle of manipulation is not just a rejection of them, it's an affirmation of yourself. By choosing peace over chaos, self-worth over subjugation, you strip them of the power they thought was eternal.